Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been a great day for bipartisanship. What a pleasure to be in the chamber on a day when we have been able to work constructively across the floor to try and execute a positive outcome for the Northern Territory in relation to the preceding motion. In relation to the motion that we are debating today, I welcome it and I thank the mover for giving us the opportunity to think about environmental protections and specifically to think about recognising the importance of safeguarding the Territory environment for future generations and in support of our Territory lifestyle, because I think we can all agree we want to live in a Northern Territory where we can enjoy our natural environment. And there's nobody here who wants to wantonly destroy what we have in terms of landscape and amenity. In terms of reaffirming support for the critical environmental protections that we have in this place, well, we're pleased to reaffirm them. What is there to say? We are not seeking to tamper with our protections. We're seeking to maintain our environmental status quo. What we are seeking to do is to break the status quo in relation to our economic malaise. And the two can happen at the same time. There is no reason for us to fear development, sustainable economic development, under the auspices of all or any of what we have been proposing to this point. And so likewise, that this motion seeks to have us commit to not undermining our strong legislative and regulatory frameworks for environmental protections is a welcome development. The question of my political leanings is a recurrent fixation of the opposition. And so let me deal with it definitively for the benefit of contextualising my contribution to this debate. Let me freely declare to all that are here that whilst I was a member of the World Wildlife Fund at age 10, I am not a member of the Greens Party. I do, however, applaud the sole member of the crossbench who has consistently actually provided evidence of relying on actual data and on actual research, as opposed to the actual opposition who have thus far demonstrated no such attention to detail in any regard. Lots and lots of talk about evidence and data, well into our second sittings, having beseeched them to look into something in practical terms, still not a single fact or figure of substance. Just obfuscation, motherhood statements, grandstanding. I find it flabbergasting that they've been able to get to this point with so little information to rely upon in building all or any of their argument. Now, meanwhile, the member for Nightcliff provides logical consistency to her arguments with what she provides by way of evidence and data. That said, the key here is that I respectfully agree to disagree with the member for Nightcliff, with the conclusions she reaches, her substantive assessments on a range of issues. It is possible to look at the same set of information and respectfully disagree. But we are looking at the information and we are looking at the data, whereas the entirety of the opposition choose to be wantonly blind of the reality of our demographic decline, economic decline, and indeed the details of what we are putting forward in relation to our legislation on improving our economic prospects. This year would have marked the 20th year of my association with the Oxford University Centre for the Environment. That is where I was previously based before I came here. And I mention it because it's relevant in relation to establishing bona fides on this debate, because the insinuation and the assertion is consistently that we're all pro-development monsters over here who are just out for all of our monopoly money buddies and desperately trying to dig up every tree with every bulldozer at our disposal. The fact is, I was based at a place that is one of the world centres for the research on climate change and for the research on carbon capture and storage and for the research on climate modelling. And even prior to my association with that place, I was based, fortuitously, on the basis of the excellent public schooling education I received under a strong and stable CLP government for 27 years at the University of Sydney in the School of Geography, where, again, all of these issues in relation to sustainable economic development, mining sustainably, protecting our waterways, looking after our built environment, urban planning, are a matter of deep consideration and a matter of great interest for me over many, many years. One of the places associated with that School of Geosciences at the University of Sydney is the Australian Mekong Resources Centre, which itself is renowned as a place of research, discussion and debate on development and environmental issues in the Mekong Delta region. Now, why do we mention the Mekong Delta? Because we're talking about water and rivers, which we are all very concerned about. And once again, it's not just myself who wants to protect our waterways, it's our many members who would be absolutely, devastated at the loss of the capacity to catch a fish in the Northern Territory. Now, we are not looking to exploit our natural resources to the detriment of the Northern Territory. We are looking to sustainably develop our economy and provide the regulatory frameworks with which to do so. The point is here that the opposition have no unique claim to being defenders of the environment, nor can they assume any specific high moral ground on issues pertaining to environmental protection. It is a shared and common aspiration for us to be able to sustainably develop the Northern Territory whilst not damaging our environment. And for that reason, I reiterate, I welcome the motion and the opportunity to debate it. As I pointed out only yesterday in respect of the reflections that this House had on the 50th anniversary of this Legislative Assembly, one of the ministers who spoke to provide context on our past history was the Honourable Darrell Manzi, who weaved in noteworthy remarks regarding the foundations upon which our economic growth was predicated, including laying the preconditions for sustainable resource development and mining, being in gas and in mining generally, and providing the regulatory frameworks that have ensured that we have to date been blessed with being able to create economic growth using mining and resource extraction without actually compromising our lifestyle and environmental protections. We are indeed fortunate to have had virtually no incidents of catastrophe in the Northern Territory over our period of development. And people have fought for protections, and people have fought for development, and people have had the opportunity to have their say, and people will continue to have the opportunity to have their say under the auspices of this government and the frameworks that we provide. There have, of course, been developments since the 1980s, many positive ones, provided by both sides of governance in the Northern Territory. And that's great, and that's how it should be. Frankly, I'm delighted that Labor did some useful work in this regard, alongside driving the economy into the ground over the last 8 years. It's fortuitous that we have accelerated an agenda that may have been dated in some regards, and that we have a foundation upon which to sustainably develop the economy. Now, I have personal experiences in and around decision-making in the major project space in the Northern Territory. And this is key because it's pretty clear that the opposition and the crossbenchers, to a very large extent, have a real lack of understanding of what came out of the Territory Economic Reconstruction Commission report, of the creation of the commission structures under their auspices to streamline and fast-track major projects within a regulatory environment that was still robust, and indeed to provide major projects delivery on any front. The fact of the matter is, the reason we have had such poor execution and delivery on major projects is because undoubtedly duplication exists. Duplication exists, as does a lack of clarity on decision-making authority. What you have at the moment are a series of public service structures that were put in place over the last 8 years of the last government, which have resulted in nobody being able to make a decision definitively, or pick up the ball, or actually try and run it into the try line. And that's part of the reason why we don't have any major projects to show for ourselves, other than works in progress. Now, the Territory Coordinator proposal is genuinely, in my opinion, a sensible, good faith, well foreshadowed attempt to address a large part of this. The now Chief Minister introduced legislation as a private member's bill in relation to the Territory Coordinator 4 years and more ago. There's been 2 parliaments worth of discussion in this area. There's been a great deal of thought put into this, and as I say, I believe it to be a sensible, good faith attempt to address a lot of these issues. One of the great concerns in the House at the moment is in relation to gas. And again, we're talking about the gas industry in very, very broad terms without much reference to actual detail. Now, once again, I would implore you to read the document in my hand, which is the October 2017 ACIL Allen Scientific Inquiry into hydraulic fracking in the Northern Territory, otherwise known as the economic impacts of a potential shale gas development in the NT. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring it up because lots of people have an opinion that they've posited about this document. I'm not convinced many people have read it cover to cover, and I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't read it cover to cover yet either. But on the basis of the decisions that we have to make in this place, I think it's incumbent on everyone in this House to know the detail, because it's pretty clear that people are picking bits out of it as and when it suits them to try and defend or discredit the idea of sustainable economic development in the Northern Territory. Now, the contrast of the diversity of opinions on it reflects that it's been poorly read, but I must confess that I'm not the person who sourced this document. I took the opportunity to meet with Frack Free NT because they wanted to voice their concerns in relation to a range of these matters. And I'm not the only one. Many of my colleagues are making time to consult and also hear a diversity of opinions. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. But what we're trying to do is respectfully take on board all of the opinions and assuage concerns that are reasonable. As I said, I met with Frack Free NT in good faith. They provided me this document. It's provided me something to do over Christmas. What's disappointing is that there are other institutional advocates for the environment which have clearly compromised their own integrity in recent times in trying to fudge the facts and figures and or the narrative as it might be. And it's timely and serendipitous that today in The Australian there is an article entitled, quote unquote, "Serpent and a Total Crock, Emails Expose Collusion." Now, I have friends who are anthropologists, and I have friends who are scientists who work in related fields. And when people fudge the figures, it discredits their work as well. So it's about making sure that we're looking at robust work, reading it, taking it on board, and that we're able to balance sustainable economic development with environmental protections. I must confess, though, that the other favour that Frack Free NT did for me the other day was in drawing to my attention, again, this briefing note that was produced by none other than the Environmental Defender's Office. This briefing note on the role of the Territory Coordinator, dated 31st October 2024, is actually a great piece of work. And the interesting thing of it was that by the time I'd finished reading it, I was much more comforted by the idea of the direction we're taking and the territory coordinator model. Because actually it points out a range of things that don't seem to be coming up in this debate at all in relation to the real scope of the territory coordinator's powers and the fact that it's not one superhuman Wizard of Oz, but a statutory body that will be informed by information from other arms of government. We are vesting in a statutory body the capacity to finally make a decision to move things forward. There is nothing in this that I read that suddenly horrified me and made me think, oh goodness me, we are dismantling democracy. No, we are trying to streamline a process and create efficiencies in a system that clearly is gridlocked and clearly is replete with inefficiencies. I think a very key thing to note here is how does the territory coordinator model work with federal laws? Well, they're very clear here in this, that the Northern Territory Government does not have the power to modify, exclude or override Commonwealth laws which apply to projects. These include approvals under a range of Commonwealth legislation. We are seeking to do our part of the heavy lifting of promoting economic development sustainably whilst protecting our environment. What we're not seeking to do is autocratically dictate what should happen, where it should happen, why it should happen, or any subject matter expert who contributes through our public service to actually contributing to the information. I'd encourage you all to have a look at this document because, as I said, I finished reading it and by the end of it I thought, well, this is great. I think these guys are on the right track. We can respectfully agree to disagree, but we need to be looking at the same information. And it's not possible to have these debates meaningfully unless we are willing to hear a plurality of voices and unless we're able to respectfully debate the issues. But in relation to the Territory Coordinator, the Chief Minister has been fair in providing opportunity for people to express concern, dissent, or indeed to offer support. There is a consultation and review process that has been clearly and publicly articulated, and there is every reason to believe that if we follow that process, everyone will have the opportunity to contribute to the debate and that these matters will come before this Parliament again. So I'm very supportive of both the proposition and motion that is being put forward today, and I see no logical inconsistency with being supportive of this government's efforts to try and streamline economic activity in this polity. Now, my personal position on energy security is in the public domain. As far as I'm concerned, we have an abundance of both sun and gas, and we should be seeking to make the best possible use of both of those things. Recent announcements by our Deputy Chief Minister point to our commitment to continuing to support solar technologies as part of a holistic approach to ensuring energy security. We recognise that large-scale solar generation, supported by adequate battery storage, is an important part, an important component of a stable and cost-efficient electricity system. And I'm especially encouraged by the detail that was provided by the said minister in recent weeks surrounding our renewable energy hub. Our commitment to that renewable energy hub involves the co-location of up to 6 large-scale solar farms. Those farms will be capable of generating 200-odd megawatts of renewable energy alongside a battery energy storage system.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, member for
Sanderson.
Standing
Order 43, request to extend the time.
Do members support an extension of time? Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was pointing out, the renewable energy hub is going to be capable of generating 180 to 210 odd megawatts of renewable energy alongside a battery energy storage system, all on a single site, which is proximate to existing network infrastructure. And that site is 940 hectares of Crown land located on the west side of Finn Road, just 19 kilometres south of Palmerston and 4 kilometres north of Berry Springs. And the electricity produced in that hub will be fed directly into the Darwin-Katherine grid, supplying clean and renewable power to Territory households and businesses. So we are trying to balance things without turning this into an ideological stomping ground. We are utilising our natural resources, which are sun and gas in abundance. And it makes good sense for us to have mature debates about utilising all of these in pursuit of ensuring energy security for the Northern Territory going into the future. Now, I'm saddened, quite frankly, by some of the suggestions that we're all climate change denialists and haters over here. Literally, to hear the word hate put out is, frankly, nonsense and unfair. The reality and the rhetoric of climate change decision-making is very, very different. The fact of the matter is, in relation to 1.5-degree targets on climate change and temperature change, those targets were long ago abandoned by the real decision makers globally in the world and top-tier scientists involved in those processes. And I haven't been to every COP, but I've certainly been to climate change forums where these matters are discussed openly, frankly, transparently, with a view to ensuring that we don't destroy our planet without trying to do the right thing by future generations. Multilateralism, the spaces within which we have these discussions about trying to mitigate global climate change, those are the forums where these conversations should be had meaningfully. And what you'll find increasingly in multilateral spaces is that the conversations are leaning towards pragmatism. And it's not the overarching statements, headlines coming out at the end of COP summits that are of most interest to people now. It is the importance of the sidebar discussions. And the sidebar discussions are where pragmatic solutions to trying to mitigate climate change and create sustainable economic growth are actually had. It's a reality that this government has chosen to no longer have a specific climate change ministry. And I don't think there's anything particularly problematic in that decision, insofar as the fact that the last climate change ministry wasn't making great leaps and bounds in mitigating climate change in any practical way at any scale in this place. To what effect do we have a ministry? To what end? To what purpose? It makes no sense to create unnecessary administration and bureaucracy. We haven't dispensed with caring about the environment. We haven't dispensed with wanting to protect the Northern Territory's natural resources simply because we have organisationally restructured the public service to ensure that there are better reporting lines and greater clarity for decision making. And the Territory Coordinator model is an expansion of precisely that. It's the continuation, Madam Speaker, of a model that has been in play for a period of time. From a time when we had ministers with high-level subject matter expertise surrounded by advisors with even greater expertise, to the devolution of that model and creating greater powers in the public service, to creating greater layers within the system to speed up processes whilst adding people to the equation, like commissioners, to a model now where we are trying to put everything in a one-stop shop to try and make sensible decisions about cutting through paperwork and tape of all forms. Climate refugees were referred to as well, and as someone who's worked in both the climate and the refugee space, we're really playing pretty fast and loose with some of the terms now. Yes, I'm very concerned about climate refugees, but I'll be honest with you, I'm concerned about them in Bangladesh, not the Barclay. Those are the places that are actually going to have people that are imminently facing loss of life and livelihood because of the downstream consequences of global climate change. Right now, we have much more pressing socioeconomic matters to address in our remote and country areas in relation to Australia and the Northern Territory specifically, before we start worrying about creating climate refugees from south of the Berrimah Line. So a modicum of perspective here is warranted, because what we've had here to a large extent today, not entirely, but to a large extent, is a bit of activism for activism's sake. That's what we've had. We've had grandstanding, and once again, the lazy conflation of issues, specifically by the Labor opposition. Fear-mongering and, look, extremely lazy, if well-intentioned, voicing of concern. Now, I note, as I said, that other members of the House on the crossbenches have raised some valid and well-informed concerns, and I respectfully disagree with some of their conclusions. But I do find it galling that we keep hearing this kind of nonsense from the Labor opposition in relation to the models we're putting forward, trampling democracy and ensuring that nobody can make a decision or be heard, and that we will have all-powerful Wizard of Oz-like figures who determine the fate of the entire jurisdiction. The Territory Coordinator is a statutory office, not a person who will singularly make decisions. The sad reality of it is that within government there is considerable red, green, but probably most importantly beige tape that exists. And the proof of that those obstructions existing is work previously conducted within the NTG. And my Cabinet colleagues and former Labor members will be able to dig that work up if they so choose. What you'll find is that work on all of the regulatory hurdles in this place has been buried, as with a range of other problematic information produced by good public servants in large numbers over the last 8 years. Regarding regulation of the gas industry, I want to note that we will ensure that the gas industry is safe and strongly regulated as its presence grows in the Northern Territory. The onshore petroleum industry is regulated under Territory laws and Commonwealth laws, and we will ensure that that continues to happen in line with community expectations. And don't forget just how many regulators are involved in the safe regulation of the industry. We have the Aboriginal Areas Protection Authority. We have the Independent Northern Territory Environment Protection Authority. We have the Environment Regulation Division. We have the Water Resources Division. We have anti-bushfires. We have the Weeds Unit. We have the Heritage Branch. The reality is we have a regulatory framework to govern the onshore gas industry, and it's designed to ensure that petroleum activity is carried out in a way that reduces risks to a minimum. Now, through a combination of risk assessments and safety standards and environmental management and community engagement, those regulations will minimise potential hazards to the environment, public health and workers, whilst allowing for responsible development of the petroleum industry. But what we're here to talk about today is bigger than just one industry, one person, or one set of laws. It's about the environment writ large. And you have to look at the entire landscape, and there is a lack of faith or appreciation for Commonwealth environmental legislation and oversight also. I return to where I started, Madam Speaker, in noting that it has been a great day for bipartisanship, in my opinion, and therefore I welcome the motion that we are debating today. And further to that, I, along with my CLP colleagues, I am sure, look forward to continuing to support the NT's framework for environmental protections and promote models for sustainable development. Thank you, Madam Speaker.